Growing up American, I remember learning about the melting pot theory of American culture. The American myth, taught to every American schoolchild, proposes that America's defining cultural trait, today and since its founding, is its cultural diversity. And indeed at any point in American history, including today, one can point to a multitude of coexisting groups of differing cultural backgrounds and traditions. America is composed of a multitude of unique waves of immigrants, ethnicities, religions, and local geographies. The existence of so many conflicting cultural forces within one nation is hardly unique in the history of empires. What is unique about the American cultural mythos is that it is this diversity itself which is at the heart of the national identity. America's defining strength, according to even the most conservative American, is its ability to tolerate, accommodate, and assimilate the various cultural viewpoints that comprise it. And yet, even an elementary study of U.S. history shows an almost endless stream of conflicts arising between these coexisting cultural groups, with the only real unity resulting from the presence of a common enemy, which is usually another cultural group to be subdued. Furthermore, the most distinct and independent subcultures are almost always vilified and oppressed by the dominant culture until they are completely eliminated or assimilated. An example of the former are the multitude of Indian tribes, and the latter is almost every new wave of immigrants who are initially treated with hostility and suspicion but are gradually assimilated until they lose all or nearly all connection to their former cultural roots. The most glaring example of this can be found in the typical, non-Southern, suburban or middle-class white American. Whatever his ancestry, the modern white American knows little of his cultural background, is generally uninterested in it, and any attempt to practice those traditions would be seen as inauthentic, outdated, and quite possibly offensive. This non-culture is endemic to not only white America, but almost any affluent area, though they may still retain a shallow connection to other cultures through the consumption of certain food and entertainment. America is, on closer inspection, perhaps less of a cultural melting pot and more of a cultural ash heap. As an American myself, I remember feeling completely apathetic about culture growing up. What culture? What? I'm supposed to care if we all speak Spanish in 20 years? I learned Spanish. It's not that hard. After all that really matters is that we are wealthy, happy, and safe, right? And yet, people care. Real people. People who still have a culture to hold on to. But I don't believe I'm alone in feeling completely devoid of any real cultural attachment, even if I am a complete sociopath. There are always at any given time at least a few prominent cultures which have yet to be assimilated or destroyed. The three most prominent modern examples are Hispanic culture, Black culture, and Southern culture. In the case of Hispanic culture, it maintains a distinct cultural presence in America due primarily to the sheer number of new immigrants constantly arriving. The first generation don't have time to assimilate completely into the mainstream and are consistently replaced by new arrivals faster than they can be assimilated. Their children and grandchildren, however, lack the connections necessary as well as the incentives to maintain their cultural heritage and quickly become thoroughly assimilated into the mainstream. Black culture is currently in the process of being assimilated but remains a distinct subculture for the time being, mainly due to its past relationship with the dominant culture. It is in the process of being integrated mainly through the exploitation of racial animosity as a means of creating converts to the dominant American religious sect, which claims to fight for racial justice and equality, as well as better material conditions. Though Black culture is often exploited and weaponized rhetorically and politically by those who push for multiculturalism, it is not yet fully assimilated into the dominant culture, which views it with a combination of pity and condescension, and which is in turn viewed with suspicion and resentment. Southern culture remains a distinct cultural force mainly out of spite, even though it has been mocked and vilified by the mainstream for decades. It has long been the target for elimination, but its ability to seriously challenge the cultural hegemony of the American mainstream has been largely neutered since the end of the Civil War. Those who belong to this culture are perhaps the most immune to cultural assimilation, but they are largely dismissed or outright vilified by the dominant culture and are gradually fading from relevance due to demographic shifts. The external policy of the dominant American culture is no different, with any culture that will not assimilate being made into an enemy. The prime examples today are nationalist China and the Islamic Middle East, who are not coincidentally the most vilified by the Western media and political establishment. The rest of the world has either assimilated or will inevitably assimilate in exchange for technological and economic development and military security. As these countries assimilate, they will become Americanized and lose touch with their own cultural traditions. So what is American culture? What are its values? What are its customs? Who benefits from its propagation? What exactly is it that existing cultures are being assimilated into? We already discussed one of the core ideological tenets of Americanism, which is multiculturalism. But the dominant American, and now Western, culture is anything but diverse. Sure, it tolerates almost any religion, custom, or ethnicity, as long as it doesn't create conflict with or assert dominance over other cultures and Americanism itself. But there's the problem: cultures are inherently exclusive and represent values that are fundamentally at odds with one another. That's the point of culture, to express and fulfill the fundamentally distinct material and immaterial interests of different groups. The creation of a universalist superculture that is all-inclusive necessitates the exclusion of all but the most inconsequential and non-threatening aspects of each culture, just as religious universalism abandons the core doctrines of the religions it is meant to encompass. Americanism, therefore, sees different cultures through a fundamentally Protestant egalitarian lens. Just as all men are equal in sin before God, Americanism views all cultures as fundamentally equal in their inferiority to the American way. Multiculturalism is therefore the logical expression of radical egalitarianism. An endorsement of any one culture implies the inferiority of others, which contradicts America's founding principles. Hence, America must be multicultural. But American multiculturalism is also fundamentally anti-cultural because culture itself is an affront to the doctrine of egalitarianism. This anti-culture, which is propagated by America and has now dominated the entire West and most of the world, seeks to eliminate cultural differences and therefore, culture itself. It purports to unite humanity by asserting the equality and compatibility of all human cultures, and in so doing facilitates the erasure of these very cultures through assimilation. The anti-culture can always claim the moral high ground when waging war against any culture that refuses to assimilate, because any real culture is fundamentally anti-egalitarian. The anti-culture must crusade endlessly against the evils of inequality, injustice, and resistance to progress. The anti-culture must conquer and subjugate every nation to its benevolent will. The anti-culture is perpetually on the right side of history, and it isn't deterred by the death of millions as long as it's all for the greater good. The anti-culture is also deeply steeped in the doctrine of progressivism, the idea that history is a series of advances and that society is always progressing toward a better state of being. It is a hyper-rationalist ideology, always questioning everything and always theorizing and attempting to engineer society. It is dogmatically committed to the science which always happens to line up with the current engineering plans being implemented. Culture, in its commitment to something eternal and real, unchanging, and unscientific, is an obstacle to progress and must be neutered or destroyed. The anti-culture propagates primarily through the spread of industrialism, be it capitalist or communist, but especially corporatist. Industrialism sees culture as an obstacle to overcome in the pursuit of greater efficiency, technological progress, and material wealth. The anti-culture maintains a symbiotic relationship with the modern political and economic system in which it provides ideological justification and eliminates cultural barriers to efficiency and compliance, while the political system perpetuates the anti-culture out of self-interest and genuine belief. The main cultural expressions of the anti-culture come in the form of 1. Displays of ideological conformity, 2. Faith in the political system, and 3. Consumption and participation in the industrial system. Ideological displays most often take the form of leftist attacks on the current system for not conforming enough to the values of the anti-culture and inept conservative defense of the current system, based of course on its conformity to the anti-culture. Voting is a display of faith in liberal values and the political process and is therefore religiously encouraged. Consumption is the main end for most individuals in modern society who have nothing greater to strive for and nothing better to do than to either consume or work to consume. Almost no cultural traditions survive in the West that aren't exploited for the purpose of selling products. Products themselves are a primary means of cultural identification and tribalism in the modern West. The fashion, music, and entertainment one chooses to consume and the sports team one roots for are often more important than one's religious affiliation. As for the so-called multiculturalism and diversity of the anti-culture, all it amounts to in the end is the consumption of inoffensive and commodified versions of assimilated cultures which are gradually erased in the process. We'll eat Mexican food, watch Japanese animation, and listen to black musicians, but the richer, more esoteric, spiritual, and far less obvious aspects of these cultures are lost to the void. The anti-culture assimilates all in the name of multiculturalism, extracting anything that can be sold and mass-produced until there is finally nothing of value left, and then it eats itself.